Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Warrant Committee. Today is Monday, January 13th. I believe we have a quorum. Karen, could you please call the roll?
Sure. We have Tom Caldwell, Steve Rhines, Lori Connolly, Elizabeth Dillon, Jay Fundling on Zoom, Allison Gagnon on Zoom, Andrew Coe, Macy Lee, Peter Mon on Zoom, Julia Maxwell, Brian McGuire, and Ronald Sia and Judy Steele are on Zoom. We have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Call the meeting to order. So thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you for those who are watching on TV. I'd like to give a very small shout out today. No one in this room, but if the meeting gets kind of slow, and for those watching at home, our Milton U14 girls are playing tonight at Milton Ulen Rink against Walpole in the state playdowns. So I just wanted to say, you can always go down to Ulen Rink. We're getting too boring for you here. And catch our girls from, most of them go to Pierce Middle School. And so I just wanted to wish them luck. So that was it. So, but I know we have a lot of exciting things to talk about here today. We are joined by our school committee and superintendent, chair of our school committee, Elizabeth Carroll, Peter Burrows from our superintendent of the public schools. We're also going to have some members of the school building committee, Sean O'Rourke, to present on two separate articles that we are going to be seeing this upcoming February at our special town meeting. So to start off, I just want to, before I introduce Dr. Burrows and our chair, Elizabeth Carroll, the school committee, I just wanted to indicate to you, they're going to be speaking, both the superintendent and the chair of the committee, regarding an amendment to Article 6 of our, which was passed in the 2019 special town meeting and established a school building committee by Article 6 in 2019. And our speakers here are going to come and discuss an amendment to that article and the appointment of some additional members, among other information they're going to be sharing with us. So all that being said, I'd invite Superintendent Dr. Burrows and Chair Lizzie Carroll to the table. Thank you very much for being here.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having us. I hope to not spread my germs tonight, but I hope you can also hear me. So thanks for having us. And yeah, we are excited to be with you all. This is our first time back visiting since our really, really exciting news about a month ago now from MSBA, the Massachusetts School Building Authority, that Milton was invited into Module 1 to basically continue working with MSBA towards a new school building project for the town of Milton that, if we move through their process successfully, would result in a 45% reimbursement from the state for eligible costs. So this is obviously a huge piece of good news for us. It will slow down our process as a town, because in complying with MSBA, there are a lot of new requirements that we need to meet, and that will take time to do the due diligence, but we're really confident that this can be the best path forward for us as a town to solve our overcrowding problem, which you've been hearing about for a long time now, obviously since 2019 when we formed the school building committee in the first place. Thank you for sharing the document. We wanted to just provide you with a summary from MSBA that lays out what we as the town of Milton are required now that we made it through the competitive process to be selected into the first module of this program. It does mean that we have to kind of get our ducks in a row from this point on to comply with requirements of MSBA. This eligibility period is a 270-day period that kind of is intended to let us do that. And the document lays out the deliverables that we need to kind of do in order to move forward out of Module 1 and continue on with the process. And Dr. Burrows and I are hoping to be able to answer questions that you might have about just generally what this means now that we're in MSBA, what we can expect, what the implications are, and so forth. But there are also, this article that the school committee is presenting to you is one very specific deliverable that we need to move ahead. And our hope to do that in the February special town meeting was our eligibility period officially kicks off May 1st. And so this would kind of allow us to get ahead of the ball. There are going to be obviously many, many things being debated and discussed at our May town meeting. So we thought if we can kind of get this taken care of, since it's very cut and dried what we need to do, then that would hopefully allow us to be ready to hit the ground running May 1st. So do you have any additional,
I know there have been questions around the timing for MSBA and specifically the module length. It pretty clearly articulates for this first module, the eligibility period, that it is 270 days. So we can't, even though we've done a lot of work over the last 5 years, that doesn't mean we can go faster. It also means that we have to re-engage in terms of looking at solutions to our overcrowding. So we've done a lot of work already, so that will certainly help, but it was pretty clear in my conversations with MSBA administration that they wanted to be sure as they were looking at Milton, they specifically asked me, are you kind of confirming that you're going to look anew at your issues, engage the community? So there is more. We are kind of traveling back in time a little bit with this process to work that I wasn't a part of. You may have been a part of this in 2019, 2020, when that work was happening here. Mm-hmm. So that will be part of this process. I do think all of the experience that we have had over the last 5 years will be very helpful in making every deadline and where we can, pushing forward slightly faster maybe than another district who is just seeing these things for the first time.
And so for the article that we are presenting to see if the town will vote to amend Article 6, just to sort of recap that, and then we're happy to take whatever questions you might have either generally on MSBA or specific to this article. And then Tom, as you mentioned, when Sean gets here, he'll be able to also walk you through the specifics of the funding request article, which is to fund 1.5 million for the feasibility study, which is another element, the other element that we need to address at this time for the first module. So for this particular article, which is submitted by the school committee, as you know, the original school building committee that currently exists is comprised of 9 people, 5 appointed by the town moderator, 2 appointed by the school committee, and 2 appointed by the select board. According to MSBA, so the fact that we have this school building committee in existence, it's, as you were just saying, Peter, it can help us kind of carry forward some momentum of some of the work that has already been done. We think, and in my discussions with Chair Wells of the select board, I think we're just really interested in keeping this moving forward so that knowing we will be adding time until we have a school ready to move into by participating in MSBA, given that we don't want to have it take any longer than it has to take. The school building committee as it currently exists is missing some key roles which the MSBA requires to be on a school building committee in a town that's participating in their program. The members that are needing to be added to our school building committee include the superintendent of schools of the district, so that would obviously be Dr. Burrows, the town administrator, Nick Milano, in our case, the director of consolidated facilities. We have decided to try to add as a person representing the facilities leadership of the town. MSBA requires that there is an individual with MCPPO certification. That person would be appointed by the school committee, but that's a particular expertise that we have 2 individuals on town staff who hold that certification. One is the assistant town moderator, town administrator, and one is the assistant superintendent, Katie Blake, for the schools. So it would probably be one of those individuals. A school principal appointed by the school committee. The Cunningham School was the designated school that we had used for our application to MSBA. They would require that it would be the principal of the Cunningham School that would be added to the school building committee, as well as a local budget official appointed by the town administrator. We are imagining that it could be helpful to have someone, Amy Dexter, in her capacity as finance director for the town on the committee. These 6 members that we are requesting to add to the school building committee as staff members of the town of Milton and Milton Public Schools, we are proposing would be non-voting members of the committee. The members of the community that are already, there through appointed by the moderator, select board, and school committee would continue as voting members. So as I mentioned, we're just trying to sort of move forward with bringing our school building committee up to date in compliance with what MSBA requires in sort of the most straightforward way possible. We presented this, the select board discussed it at their last meeting, and one sort of suggestion, I think it's really like a presentation edit that they proposed to the way we had worded the article, was just to add into the language of the article itself a list of the current school building committee roster, and so we, happily accepted that suggestion. And so the language of the article, as it would appear in the warrant, would say to see if the town will vote to amend Article 6 of the 2019 February special town meeting by adding positions to the school building committee established by said Article 6. It would list out the current school building committee roster with those first 9 positions as voting members. It would then list out the 6 people that we're proposing to add, and to act on anything relating thereto is the language of the article. We took this straight from MSBA, submitted by the school committee. So that's that, and we're happy to open up for any questions you might have. But thank you for your consideration.
Macy?
Quick question, is it necessary to list the individuals? Would you rather be just the position so that if you need to replace someone, that you don't have to go through another amendment?
That's what, yes, so we do have just the position listed.
Okay.
Yes, sorry. So when I was just sort of explaining it by names and whatnot, that's just sort of background for you. But yeah, the language of the article itself will just list out position, voting status, superintendent of schools, town administrator, director of consolidated facilities, individual with MCPPO certification, appointed by the school committee, school principal, appointed by the school committee, local budget official, appointed by the town administrator. So yeah, thank you for that, for clarifying that. Yes.
Will these people, they're Milton staff members, will any of them have to be compensated for their work on this committee? And do we know what that amount would cost?
That's an interesting question. It hasn't come up. I think we were, I'll speak for myself. I have assumed that nobody would be compensated for their service on this committee, that it is viewed as part of their jobs in those roles. And that, like with any of these salaried positions, there might be requirements like
These are,
attending the meetings and whatnot, which is just part of their work. But do you have anything to add to that?
I mean, I was just going to say, they're all administrative positions, so it's, I think it's part and parcel of the work we do that days kind of undulate.
You know, what, if I could, just a couple of questions is maybe just for people who don't know, who are watching on television or just maybe members of the committee. What is the MCPPO?
What's that stand for, do you know?
I looked it up. It's a Massachusetts Certified Public Purchasing Official designation.
Yes, you beat me to that. It's like a certification in procurement
Okay.
related.
And just to again, the article is being requested to fall into compliance with the Massachusetts school
Correct.
building. So this is that's essentially the change from 2019 to today.
That's exactly it. All we are requesting is these changes which flesh out the school building committee, basically, to what MSBA requires for us to stay in compliance and move through Module 1 and to remain eligible to continue in the program.
And there is, so MSBA articulates these 6 positions have to be. The other part is local decision. So that's the part that we've, as Lizzie mentioned, that we've already done this work. Essentially, we've already set ourselves up for this. So these are the remaining positions that aren't on our current committee.
Julie.
And if we don't do this for whatever reason, does that stop the whole?
I think it would.
process?
So the MSBA process has some sort of time limit to it in which some point theoretically one would get the money if it's awarded to us, and we would build the school if that's what the town chose to do. But here, this is sort of binding the town until it's amended again to have all of these individuals be.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if there's ever a point in which there isn't an individual with MCPPO certification, if those two people, for whatever reason, decided to leave, go do something else, what would then happen? And should we put an outside date, like until such a date? Because this is making them a member forever until it's amended again.
So, I mean, my expectation with that would just be that if there was no individual working for the town who first of all, I think we would need to always have people working for the town that have that certification. I think that would present larger issues than just MSBA. But if we were in that situation, I think it would be important to have somebody achieve that certification in order to remain in compliance and not, forfeit our ability to have 45% of the school reimbursed because we didn't maintain a certification on our staff, which is arguably just important for them to be doing their full jobs, not just fulfilling the role on the school building committee. So that's just my thought on that. I mean, we want to be careful. One thing I will say, just generally speaking, about wording for the article, and obviously you all have the ability to make whatever recommendation you choose to put into the warrant. We have to be very careful with changing wording of the articles. Any changes we need to make beyond presentation edits, such as, accepting to fully list all the members, including pre-existing members, would have to be run by MSBA, just to make sure that in making any changes to language, we're not somehow changing it something of substance that they would challenge. So we are glad to be talking to you about this now, just because we all understand the timing is kind of getting tight for February and getting the language into the article, into the warrant, rather. I just wanted to say one quick piece. At the top of the document from the MSBA, it, I think, provides just a kind of good, clear summary of this eligibility period. It's, the purpose of this 270-day period is to assist the MSBA with managing its financial resources by identifying early in the process whether a district is ready to manage and fund a capital school project, as well as its financial and community readiness. So the eligibility period is basically our opportunity to demonstrate to MSBA that, you know, as a district, we are ready to move this project forward. And then, of course, you know, the town has the ultimate say in a debt exclusion override vote. But I think MSBA is just looking for us as a district to get all our ducks in a row, sort of in advance, well in advance of that.
A question for you. So you said that the timeline 270 starts in May town meeting, correct?
May 1st.
May 1st. So 270 days from May 1st is approximately January 26th of next year, right? So my question for you is, in parallel, what happens if we don't qualify for something with MSBA? Are you going to keep pursuing for the town? Because the original plan was for the town to do this by ourselves without them, right? That's changed, which is good. So what's the plan? Are you going to have a parallel track? So if something happens, right, there's 10 modules in their plan, right? We're in module 1. So assuming these other modules would seem to follow the construction track, schematic, et cetera, through there, what's our plan on that? Have you guys thought about that? And the last thing I think I would ask on that too is, in that 270 days, can our teams continue to work on the project, keep going? Is there any restrictions on that so we don't lose any? Because it's a long time, right? We're going to essentially lose a year going through this process. Sorry, that's a lot there.
Yeah, I mean,
Sorry.
what I've heard from other superintendents who have been through this process, and there were some who were admitted in with us in December who had been through this process once before and went through a number of modules and then weren't able to complete it because they didn't get funding from the town. So generally, from what I have ascertained, most districts make it all the way through the different, the modules leading up to asking the town for funding. So the eligibility and feasibility, generally, people are successful, and where it falls short is the funding piece. So, you know, I haven't heard anything in terms of currently like parallel. The current school building committee, as you know, has done a lot of work and a lot of design work too, to get pretty far to where, right, there was conversation in town around bringing that to a vote for funding and a number, right, with a number. So I think right now the focus is on going through the modules, which have, I mean, it's a slightly longer process, but it is matched funding, and that's the key difference here that I think in talking to everyone involved with the school building committee and others feel like it's a, you know, there are some pros and cons, right, to entering into the MSBA process. That matched funding is huge.
Yeah, it seems the debt service would be beneficial to having that match funding, right? The long-term debt for the town, having roughly $80 to $90 million on the state versus here, as a taxpayer, I think I'd probably appreciate that too, but
Yeah.
that's why I was asking.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Jay was next.
Thank you. So I'm curious, so we're adding positions because MSBA wants us to, but we're adding them as non-voting positions. Can you explain why that is, and have we confirmed that MSBA is okay with us adding these positions that they require and having them be non-voted?
Sure. So, I mean, the basic reason why we're proposing them as non-voting is that they're town employees. And so we're not proposing to put town employees in the position of voting on these matters, but rather having them on the committee, fully participating in all of the discussions. Their expertise would be able to hopefully help inform how the community members who are on the committee then take their votes. Does that make sense? And MSBA, I think this is a standard practice from what we've been able to tell with town employees participating as non-voting members.
Madam Chair, I see we have another guest here.
Yeah, thank
Would he like to come to the table?
Sure.
Mark Loring, member of the school committee?
Yeah, so Mark is, he's chairing our finance subcommittee this year for the school committee, and he's also here tonight, though, in his capacity as vice chair of the school building committee. So Mark represents the school committee along with Dr. Selena Miranda on the school building committee. There are two representatives on the school building committee. And so you made it over from your other meeting.
Did, yes.
Thank you for coming. So we had sort of gone over basic, big picture of the eligibility period, and we were talking about just back and forth about the article that we proposed.
Thank you for being here.
Sorry for my tardiness.
No, not at all. Macy?
So I just want to follow up on the amendment to Article 6. The language that you are proposing to use for the amendment, are you intending to take it from a standard template form, which is referred to on page 1 of the MSBA Module 1? Is that the language that you're going to take and then put it into the article so that you will face least resistance and hopefully immediate approval from MSBA? Is that your intention?
That was the idea.
Liz?
Yeah, so I feel like I didn't get a answer to my question first about why, is there something stopping us from putting a time frame after which these people wouldn't necessarily be a member of the school building committee? Because while they are non-voting, I imagine they'll be participating in discussions. After a new school is built, I don't know that they're necessary. The MSBA wouldn't be requiring them to be on the committee at that time. And then my second question was part of Steve's question, which is to, and I'm not trying to misclassify. It was germinated in my mind from what I thought Steve said, which is if for some reason we are not granted the money, are we then going to have to go back to one or another plan? I mean, so we have done a lot of, the school building committee has done a lot of work. They have had some sorts of plans drawn up, got a, price, as you referenced, Dr. Burrows. So what happens with that should we not get the funding from the MSBA? Which plan are we going back to? Are we going back to square one, sort of with the school building committee's original plan? I don't know what happens then.
I mean, you can take a stab at that. I have a thought, but go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's not clear, right? It kind of depends on why we lose the funding, right? What step we are in the process. If it's the town voting against the project, why? The current project is that the school building committee has pushed through with Arrow Street without any state funding is necessarily going to be more expensive to the town and to the taxpayers than going with MSBA, right? That's obviously, as was discussed, one of the advantages. So I don't necessarily, from my personal perspective, don't necessarily see if the town votes down funding for the MSBA project that there'd be appetite to spend more money for a different project, because I think likely the assumption is if the town votes it down, it's for financial reasons. But again, there's a lot of unknowns. The kind of once we get to that timeline, we would have at that point, as you're kind of saying, a schematic design produced by whatever new architect is assigned to us through the MSBA process. We'd also still have the schematic design that we have right now from Arrow Street, so we would have kind of two designs. How similar they will be, time will tell. So at that point, we the school building committee potentially would add options, but it really depends on the reason that we don't move forward in the process.
To your question about the timeline of the positions, I mean, I think I'm just making sure I'm understanding your question better. It sounds like you're, I think by definition, a school building committee exists to work on a particular school building project, whether that's a major renovation or a new building. So you referenced like once the building is built, I mean, my understanding and the way it has worked in the past in Milton is then the school building committee no longer exists in that form. The project is completed, the school building committee has completed its work. So there wouldn't be a need to sort of set a time limit on MSBA required positions for a future point at which, you know, we still need a school building committee. We're not with MSBA anymore. I mean, my personal take on this is, it is in, I know there are a lot of unknowns, that's true, but it is in our control, like whether we comply with the requirements of these deliverables or we don't. So they're not gonna take the money away from us unless we fail to comply with the deliverables that they've very clearly laid out for us and that we have ample time to work towards. So I mean, anything can happen. We have a lot of pressing concerns in this town, obviously, and we have limited resources, so that's very true and important. And you'll be considering separately the feasibility study funding request article that the school building committee is putting forward, which is part of this larger process. But I almost feel anxious to sit here and like think about, oh, well, if we lose the funding, if we don't, can we just agree that, you know, we're gonna do everything we can to make good on this like great opportunity that we tried to get for several years. We finally got it. You know, the minority of districts that apply for it actually get invited in to receive this. Yeah, it's really an, you know, important benefit from the state. So I would be extremely disappointed if now, having been invited into this program, we do anything as leaders of the town that mean we have to get kicked out of the program. I mean, that would be very, very disappointing and honestly, like, embarrassing for us as a town, I feel. So I hope that's just such a total hypothetical. We don't, you know, it's clear cut what we have to do. And I think, you know, these are just the beginning stages. It's something that all of us will be talking about and working on for years to come. So I don't know if that answers the question, if there's other,
It seems like the only barrier right now is the amendment to Article 6. That's the first step that you need to take for this to keep going.
this
And
is,
I'm not saying it's just
this
that.
is like a very, well, this is the school committees, so this is the school committee's like piece of this for right now because, you know, because quite obviously what we're asking to be able to do is amend the roster of the school building committee. That's not something the school building committee is gonna request to do. That's, the school committee was the body that first brought forward Article 6 in 2019 to request that as a town, we would create the school building committee. So now it falls back to the school committee to bring this request to sort of evolve it, you know, to meet this new situation that we find ourselves in, which is a district in MSBA's eligibility period.
Allison?
Oh, she did lower her hand, but Jay's is up.
Hi, yeah, sorry. Okay. Yeah, so I had a question about kind of going off Steve and you know, the plan. So if this doesn't go through, like, what are we doing in the interim? Because we're looking at down the road, like, what's our short-term solutions, because we're on like 5 or 6 years of the building committee being together, and it was to solve space, but we also need to think about the short term as well as the long term. So I just wanted to know if there was a plan for that. Thank you.
Sure, so we've just been discussing this at the Capital Planning Improvement Committee, Capital Improvement Planning Committee, sorry, I always get that mixed up. Yes, we've just been discussing this, and it will be coming back before you all. That will likely be for the May town meeting, but we are continuing to work within the spaces. Dr. Burrows, you can outline some of the changes that have continued happening, like within the walls of our buildings. And we are continuing to learn more about and push forward, hopefully, with the project at the Cunningham, Collycott Library and 4th floor renovation project. That is our best option, for really our only option at this point within the walls that we have to continue making short-term solutions. But what do you want to both add to that?
Yeah, I can just say this is
It's
under.
okay, sorry.
Oh, of course. No,
Trying to
please.
recognize.
This is,
people.
that work, to Allison's question, that work falls under the purview of the Facility Advisory Committee for the school committee. So it's not part of the work that the school building committee is doing, just to be clear. So it's a little bit different from these articles. But again, Facility Advisory Committee meets on a monthly basis. As Lizzie said, essentially the primary goal of ours last year and now going into this year has been the Cunningham 4th floor and 3rd floor renovations to create more classroom space and expand usage of that building, given it has 2 buildings. Over the summer, we built more permanent walls in the Pierce and the Cunningham Collycott Library in order to create more permanent classroom spaces as we continue to kind of cut up shared spaces within the buildings to address the overcrowding in the short term. We converted closets into additional offices as we continue to just find every speck and corner we can. So that's kind of happening across the district. As Lizzie said, all of these are what we are trying to find within spaces. There's still some other storage and records things we are looking at, even at the high school, that the Facility Advisory Committee has talked through. So trying to find what we can within the building, given that it is the cheaper option, and we are hopeful about the MSBA project kind of long-term, and so trying to be mindful of balancing, addressing the need with also the financial implications of all these things and how costly construction is, and how do we create long-term assets for the district and for the town, while also addressing kind of short-term space challenges and preparing for kind of the long-term prospect of a new building.
I just got a follow-up. Why is the additional funding for Cunningham being put on the May, and the feasibility being put when we don't start until May, 270 days before each other?
Yeah, this, again, covers a little bit the school building committee article, which Sean is even more smarter than I am and can talk to. You don't have to wait 270 days, so that's a maximum length of time. Just to be clear, you can go much as quick as you can. Obviously, there's some limitation, but our goal is to move as quickly as possible because construction costs will only go up and the need is not going away. And so those are 2 reasons we want to move kind of these things along as quickly as we can. The consideration of the 4th floor is something that the Facility Advisory Committee and the school committee is advocating goes on the February town meeting vote. However, that is a consideration that is going through the capital request. It's very uncommon for capital requests, I believe, to kind of go through non-May town meetings. Again, we are pushing that because of the fact that if we get the funding allocated in May, we don't have access to it till July, and then we lose this summer. If we get it in February, we have the chance of being able to do some construction work in this upcoming summer. And so again, time of the essence, and the sooner we can sign a contract, the cheaper it will be, all of those reasons. However, we do understand it's a large amount of money, and the capital committee is reviewing that also along with a lot of other capital needs, and I assume they will, again, they'll have a meeting and make that decision, but we are doing what we can to advocate for just that reason, Allison.
Jay?
Thank you. I wanted to go back to the question that my colleague Ms. Lee asked. I may have misunderstood it. It sounded like she asked if the warrant article was going to follow the format of a standard template form that's referred to in the document. And I believe you said yes, and I don't understand what that means. I thought the warrant article was going to be what we got in front of us a few days ago, but adding the current members. Did I mishear that? Can you clarify?
So I could try to clarify to just say that we've worked with the town administrator to make sure that the language of the article is approved by MSBA in the language that they want these articles to appear. So that's my understanding of that.
And Jay, I just want to clarify that I referred to page 1, it said there was a standard template form, which must adhere to MSBA's minimum required for memberships. So that's what that was my reference when I asked the question.
Yeah, and that, it just circles back to my point earlier, which is that if there are suggestions for changing the language of the article, we would need time to run that by the council at MSBA to make sure that we wouldn't inadvertently put something before the town meeting that somehow would not comply exactly with what their expectations are. Everything in these 2 articles that you're seeing on this topic for February has been already run by MSBA. They've given their approval on the wording that that we've put forward.
Apologies for asking this. I'm new. But, well, first, a couple things. Like, the state could say, they could, like, tone down the project, right? They could say, you don't need this, you need this, something like that. That's theoretically possible, right? That's the point of the feasibility study, I suspect.
Yeah, I mean, they will be approving the project each step of the way.
Right. So you guys have been, the building committee's been going for 5 years. And the student population's been fairly stagnant in that time. Has that changed what you think you might need?
Yeah, I can speak to enrollment. So the population has been relatively flat since the formation of the school building committee. However, the school building committee was created to address the population increase that had existed for the prior decade. And so overall, we have more than 600 students, closer to 700 students than we had when our schools were finished being built, right? What our schools were built to, which is what MSBA does, right? It builds your current population. And so when that was finished, since that time, we've added close to 700 kids. It's around 680, I think. I have the exact numbers and can share that with you. So what the school project is trying to do is say, okay, we have 680 kids. That is the size of one of our K-8s. It's actually bigger than many of our K-8s. So like we are right now squeezing those across all of our buildings. We need a different plan, right? We've tried to live with that. So the project is not trying to address growth over the last 5 years. It's trying to address growth since the last school buildings were done.
What are you trying to get to? You're at 23 kids per classroom, right? Is the average?
The average class size is just a really tough metric because you have wide difference within special education classes, within grade spans, right? Even high school, right? You're subscribing to certain courses. So classroom size as a whole is not a great metric. Again, if we talk about enrollment, number of kids we are squeezing within these buildings, it's around like 684 kids, or additional kids that we are right now trying to squeeze within buildings that weren't designed for them. And so that number is the thing we are trying to address, that we're trying to build a school to create space for.
Can I just add one thing to that? I think one of the reasons that, for me, it's So validating that we have been accepted into MSBA program is that it shows through a competitive process where we are measured against other districts who've applied for overcrowding, as well as districts who've applied for like deteriorating buildings. They may not have overcrowding, but they may have buildings that are falling down around them. So MSBA is constantly vetting like competing priorities, and they don't have enough resources to give everyone who might need the resources. So therefore, you know, when we knew that, and we received feedback when we were, you know, applying in previous years, the fact that we didn't receive the funding in the previous years, that we weren't, you know, invited in, didn't mean that our overcrowding was not a problem that existed. It just meant that other districts' priorities were perceived to be more acute, more urgent than ours. At this point, to your question about, you know, 5 years after the school building committee was formed, the MSBA has looked at our most recent application and given us like a priority to treatment to welcome us into the program. So there's, I think, one way to look at the fact that we've been invited into the program. It totally validates that our overcrowding problem is needing to be solved. They did a lot of crunching numbers, looking at all of our projections, our data, our class size. They walked through the buildings. You know, they took a lot of due diligence before they decided that they would invite us in over other districts that are facing whatever other challenges they're facing. So it's not, you know, it's an important question still, and it's not to discount the question at all, but it's just, I think that that's an important takeaway we can all have from the fact that we've been invited into it, is that, you know, I don't think we need to necessarily, I think we can hopefully shift our energy from, you know, sort of sharing the evidence of our overcrowding problem to what are we doing to solve the problem now with the state's help.
Just a quick question. In almost every presentation we've had from the school building construction group, the metric you've used is overcrowding in the classrooms. You're saying that's not the metric to use. What's your top 3 metrics, and why should we support it? What are those top 3 metrics?
I'm not saying classroom size is not an important metric, to be clear. I'm just saying to break it down to a single, say this is the classroom size, is challenging for all those reasons that I mentioned. On top of that is like the French versus English difference. And so there's just, it is difficult to get to a singular number. Again, I think the issue is space, and it's space across the board. It's space both for classrooms, it's space for pull-out services, right, for students with disabilities, English language learners, and the needs they have, our growing substantially separate population and the unique spaces they need, and sensory spaces. It is all of those things on top of each other, and those are the things that when you walk through the buildings, right, as MSBA did and was able to see, and is a reason why we got in, you're able to see that kids are on top of each other, right? There is no more like library. There is no space to do this, right? We have to have the meeting outside because there's literally no meeting space within the building because they need it for IEP meetings or, again, pull-out services, small group interventions, all more and more. And so the more you're trying to fit all these kids within a space that was not designed to house that many kids, you just have no breathing room and the ability to do this. And that's on top of the impacts, obviously, to the cafeterias, right, to parking and bathrooms, and you know, the list goes on in terms of all the shared services that kind of exist within a building. So again, I mean, Sean has a fantastic graph as he's shown you in terms of like all the work the school committee's done and the math around how when you pull out the 5th grade and pre-K, and it kind of gets us this level in terms of like what the planned capacity was for the buildings. But I do think just the sheer number, right, the difference between kind of where we were at the end and where we are now, that is greater than a full-size school that we have right now. And so that is why we are trying to build. That's why we need to build another school at this point for that growth.
Thanks.
Okay, so we'll go Liz, Macy, Andrew.
So I had 2 things to say. So looking at this information that you had sent around, Lizzie, for the MSBA, I noticed sort of like it's a timeline, and there's a online enrollment projection tool, and then there's an enrollment meeting. And those both, at least in the timeline that's set forth here, are before the local vote authorization. So my question is, it looks like the MSBA is going to be doing some looking into on their own with information that's provided by the town, but also their own information to see whether the enrollment is, such that we need a new school, or, if they're going to support that. And then there's also a maintenance and capital planning meeting. So I'm wondering, one, do you anticipate, is that the case that we will have that meeting before the people of Milton vote on whether or not to continue? And then two, at what point do we have to start spending the money? I know 45% of which, if we complete the feasibility study, but that's also listed after. So I'm just curious, would this enrollment discussion be happening before we're spending significant taxpayer dollars? Now, on a separate note, I had another thing to say, which was Allison had kindly mentioned, what are we doing in the short term? And I know that there had been a lot of buzz at the town meeting, one of the ones last year, about potentially using trailers. Have we looked into that, and what have we decided about that? Because I think a lot of people around town would like to know, because that's been discussed. Two kind of unrelated things.
Well, so it's just, as I said, that we were just discussing that on Thursday at Capitol. We'll be discussing it again this Thursday. Those meetings are at 7 a.m. if anybody's looking for something to do at 7 a.m. on Thursday mornings. So with that conversation is ongoing. And, I think the part Mark mentioned, and this was something that we did discuss and will continue to discuss, is just trying to spend our money as strategically as possible as a town for permanent assets, that will continue to be beneficial longer term. And we sort of are looking with Tom McCarthy, the facilities director, consolidated facilities director, that was a takeaway from the last meeting, is that we're gonna circle back to the question of the modulars and be able to pull forward the information that was done in research about that at this point a few years ago. So that's all sort of under discussion.
About the vote. The second thing, or the first thing that I had asked was, do you anticipate that we'll have the enrollment, look into the enrollment by the MSBA before the people of Milton vote, and/or before we have to spend a lot of money?
Yeah, so we're getting a little bit into the other warrant article. I just want to name that because I think our other two guests here would be really good on that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
back.
Are you all set?
Yes, thank you so much.
Macy?
Just a follow-up question regarding overcrowding. So when you refer to overcrowding and the inability to exactly pinpoint with regards to class size, is the focus primarily on the elementary and middle school level versus the high school level?
Yeah, that is what the school building committee has determined, and also from the facility advisory committee perspective, what we've determined is the most acute. The high school is feeling the pinch as well because of the expansion of specifically kind of like specialized services, especially over this time. If you look at their enrollment though, from now to when we first built the high school, it's actually pretty flat. Like it hasn't seen the spike that we've seen at the K-8s and the middle school. Now there's concern that that could change over time. The high school is a little bit more unique in that it does have some more land right around it, so like possibly you do an addition in the future, but as of now, we don't think it's worth building that out because the real pinch point is at those K-8 levels at Pearson for K-5 schools. And so as we're identifying kind of a plan that supports all, that's the goal. The other point of the original school building project idea, which again will now have to be discussed kind of within the MSBA process, was to be able to pull out some of the potential central office portions of the work that right now are housed at the high school, take those out, and that actually providing some additional space and addressing some of the overcrowding needs for the high school. And we've looked at that within the Facility Advisory Committee as well, where we have consolidated facilities is based out of the high school, and so being able to pull that out and put that somewhere else would provide space, as well as Peter is constantly being asked to kind of get out of his space in the central office over there. But yeah, the principal of the high school would be upset with me if I were to say anything other than they are also feeling a crunch, but from our perspective, it's just not quite as acute as the other spaces.
Judy.
Thank you, Tom. I think I believe to remember that the pre-K that was going to be added to this project was going to expand their enrollment. Is that going to be part of the NOW project with the state?
The plan, the initial design was to keep the preschool at its current size, so it wasn't looking at an expansion, but it was looking at bringing together all of our services under one roof. Right now, we're in two schools. We're at Cunningham and Tucker, so that would enable us to have all preschool staff in one place, all services in one place. There's a lot of excitement from our preschool team about being together in one location, but it's not looking at expansion of that program.
Okay,
But
thank you.
Just one piece about that, though, is the pre-K enrollment numbers, largely for the vast majority of our pre-K classrooms, are driven by enrollment and special education services that we're providing to children beginning at age 3, and then providing them with appropriate peer ratios in the pre-K classrooms. So, we're not in total control of the size of the enrollment of our pre-K program. So just to remind everybody of that, we serve the needs of the children that are living in town.
Right, so that's fluid perhaps every year then because of the needs of,
Yep, that's right.
of the program. But basically, you're not going to extend it beyond that, I think was my question.
Yeah, no, that wasn't part of the plan at this time.
Okay, thank you.
I just wanted to make sure I had a firm understanding of what was being discussed here. I'm trying to reconcile something you said, Dr. Burrows, that most towns, most districts makes it through the modules to the point at which the town votes on the budget. And something you said, Lizzie, made me believe that we were, assuming we make it through that vote, we were essentially assured. Are there other risk factors after the budget vote that we should be aware of that puts us at risk? And the reason I ask this question is, as Mark astutely pointed out, further you kick this process down the road, there's additional costs. And sort of the quick follow-up question beyond that is that trying to get a sense of scope of additional overhead we should expect other than mandated revisions by the MSBA that we should look at in terms of cost to the project. So
Yeah, no, thanks for the opportunity to clarify that. What I was trying to say is that, it will ultimately be the voters who decide.
Yep.
And so that, but up till that point, we have a clear path that we can be following.
Got it.
In order to make sure we get to bring it to the voters. That's really what, with the opportunity for that reimbursement.
And then after the vote, is that the end of the process? Or is there other risk factors we should be aware of that could put the funding at risk?
Not that should put the funding at risk, just the risk factors are cost overruns, right? It's, there are construction, MSBA projects that went out to bid before the pandemic, right? And then did construction kind of during the or had their funding set before the pandemic, then had construction during the pandemic, and costs went way higher, and so their reimbursement amount was way less than they were expecting. And so that is, that hopefully we don't have another global pandemic here in the next few years, but obviously those were unforeseen costs. So like those types of construction cost overruns, but obviously if the town allocates a certain amount of money for a project, the project is not able to go over that amount of money unless it comes back to the town again and would have to do the same process of going to town meeting to get 2/3 vote and then getting 50% of town-wide residents to approve an additional, which I think is, you know, going to be, it's going to be tough the first time, much less doing it kind of 2 times. So
So just to be clear, town approves a budget, project stays roughly within budget. Are there any other requirements, or assuming we get all of our ducks in a row and all of our paperwork in on time, are there other things that put the funding at risk?
again, it's,
I think so.
Yeah, I
I
don't-
think it's once the town approves the funding, then it's a building project, and you're working, like Mark said.
Okay, great.
Like managing cost overruns, making sure things are on track, making sure the timeline is appropriate. That you've kind of crossed all the MSBA hurdles by that point.
Okay.
I'll say it's a decent question to ask our consultant with PMA, who's done school building projects through MSBA before and has even greater expertise when they come up.
And then in terms of doing all this due diligence or filling out all the requirements, are there material added costs that we should be aware of that the application process adds to this?
I mean, the cost of escalation is sort of built into it, just knowing that, you know, this, by taking time to do this program, it makes it ultimately cost more, but I don't think there are added costs that I know of. I don't, do you?
I just want to make sure we're not
Yeah.
talking
I mean, the
about
cost-
adding consultants and,
Again, it gets a little bit into the other article, but like the cost though that is being requested for the feasibility and schematic design should be the cost that covers kind of the,
got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
traffic consultants and like figuring out the project and identifying the unknowns, right? And trying to eliminate as many unknowns as possible so that you have a good sense of what the project is going to be and therefore what it will cost, right? That's the whole idea behind the feasibility and schematic design process, to uncover those.
Yeah, really what I'm getting at is, by undergoing this, are we inadvertently, and if we fail, for whatever reason, are we inadvertently adding additional costs to go through this process and also adding additional costs by kicking the can down the road another 6 months to a year?
Oh, you mean additional costs other than doing the project outside of MSBA?
If we're forced to revert back to that. I'm trying to get a sense of what happens if we fail.
Kids suffer. I mean, that's
No.
even more.
Well,
I understand you're talking about
that's a
financial, but I
different-
just want to bring it, like, the whole point of this is to help kids. And so, like, that is, I think, where our site is like the impact that's going to have on the students.
And I don't-
So we can't.
I don't question that at all.
No, I understand
Yeah, it's really a question of,
It's really a matter of time, right? Peter and his team are going to spend a lot of time on this. Tom McCarthy at Consolidated Facilities is going to spend a lot of time. Nick and Amy at the town, they're going to spend a lot of time on all this work, kind of leading up to feasibility and schematic design in Module 1, a lot of time in Module 2, all those staff members that we are adding to this committee, right? They already have full-time jobs. We're now asking them to be a part of this committee in the afternoon, so we don't take that lightly. That's going to be a lot of, I think that is the cost, is we are going to be kind of asking more of the people who are already doing a whole lot in a town that is already strapped for resources, and they're already probably doing like 2 or 3 jobs.
I'm not questioning any of that. And really what I'm trying to understand are what are the risk factors around
Yeah.
this? How do we manage that?
Just, it's worth mentioning that, you know, as a district in the program, we do have the opportunity, we have one staff person at MSBA who's assigned to work with Milton, and that is our point person. So that is built into the program, participating in the program is to have her consulting, you know, as we go through. So that is at no cost, you know, to us. That's just sort of a benefit of being in the program, is having her support too.
Thank you.
Brian?
getting back to my previous question, you said there's other metrics besides classrooms, right? Can we get a breakdown of how you figure out the overcrowding situation, like whether it be by classrooms for high school, middle school, size of the school, whatever it is? You said there's other metrics, so can we get that?
Yeah, again, I think Sean's got a ton of stuff on it. I can share enrollment stuff. Again, that has both. Sean's got space constraints and the space studies that they've done. And again, the enrollment numbers, as I shared previously, and the metrics on increased
Square
special
foot.
education costs versus our education students in proportion now versus, 15 years ago at this point. So yeah, we can share some of those metrics.
Julia?
Yeah, just, there's a large body of documents from the school building committee online that you can reference that have all of those. I mean, there's a great graph about where the capacity of the schools was built for and how long ago we exceeded that in K through 5, and that was 2009 that we started to exceed that. So all of this information exists, and I would definitely recommend that you check out the school building committee page on the town website, because you can see a lot of the resources there.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, does anybody here on the committee and on Zoom have any further questions regarding the amendment to Article 6 to the 2019 special town meeting, change the school building committee, to amend it to allow the new members? Are there any questions as to this article? Okay, I don't see any hands raised. Superintendent, Dr. Carroll, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just appreciate your time, and I'll stay in case other questions come up
You're more than
in your
welcome.
next piece of the discussion. But thank you for all your time and thoughtfulness around this
Thank you.
question. We're excited. It's
Thank
going to be a
Thank you.
busy few years. Thank you.
And Member Loring, if you want to stay at the table, you may, or you can step back. Thank you both. I see our second presenter, Mr. Sean O'Rourke of the School Building Committee, is here. Mr. O'Rourke, thank you so much for being with the Warrant Committee. Again, your second committee meeting tonight.
Yeah. Just grab my laptop.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Mr. O'Rourke was at another meeting this evening, the School Building Committee, but was gracious to double dip tonight and join us. So just as Mr. O'Rourke is just getting set up, I'd like to, this would be essentially the next article on our draft warrant. And Mr. O'Rourke is going to talk about appropriate.
No, it's all good.
It's a request for appropriation to borrow, transfer from available funds to be expended under the School Building Committee for a feasibility study of an elementary or middle school project for the Cunningham School at 44 Edge Hill Road in Milton. This obviously blends into what we were just talking about with the MSBA. So the draft language essentially is complete, unless I'm told otherwise, on our draft warrants. And Mr. O'Rourke, the floor is yours, so please.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just for the record, Sean O'Rourke, 27 Quarry Lane, town meeting member, precinct 8, chair of the school building committee. With me tonight also is Sean Burke from PMA Consultants. Is it okay if he sits up?
Mr. Burke, please, I'm sorry, please step forward and grab a chair. And thank you also for being here with Mr. O'Rourke and Mr. Warren.
Yeah, I'll let him introduce himself too.
Sean Burke, 100 Whittier Road, town meeting member, precinct 9.
Thank you.
Right. I apologize. Some of the stuff I might present might be repetitive because I wasn't open to the previous conversation. So
That's fine. I was a little nervous that these were going to kind of blend together.
That's
anyway.
fine.
So please.
Could you just make me a presenter? I'll do a short presentation. And
Can you accept the panelist invitation?
yeah, I apologize. You sent that and I didn't have my laptop open last time. no audio, no mic. Perfect. Screen share, and then just double check. All right. So for MSBA, essentially, since the last time I was here, we were invited into feasibility study, which is basically, it was a big threshold to cross for this project to get accepted to that. So basically what it does is it brings us into a number of what they call modules. So if you go to MSBA's website, there's a number of modules. The first one that I want to talk about is the eligibility period, which is basically what the two articles we're talking about tonight. So when you click on the eligibility period, it brings you into essentially sub-modules that are part of Module 1. So the first part is, accepting the invitation to the eligibility period, which we've done. So then as you walk through, there's a number of steps that happen. The entire Module 1 has to be completed in 270 days. That's the maximum. We're not trying to hit the maximum, we're trying to hit the minimum. So the first step on it is what they call their ICC, Initial Compliance Certification. It's basically just acknowledgement to the program. It's signed by the town executives, most likely the chair of the select board, the superintendent of the schools, and the chair of the school committee. So they give you 30 days for that one. That one should be very quick. Yes?
Did we do it?
Not yet.
Isn't it like due?
Well, the eligibility period starts May 1st.
Oh, right.
Yeah, so, no. Thank you. No. I mean, everything pull it back to a different framework. So this 270-day clock starts May 1st. And what we're trying to do is not just sit around, wait till May 1st, get everything for the May meeting. We want to get ahead of everything as best we can, essentially be proactive rather than reactive.
Is there an April 1st deadline? Because I have that.
No.
Wasn't there an April 1st mentioned? No.
Yep. So the second component on there, which they give you 60 days, was the previous article that you just talked about, formation of the school building committee. As everyone's aware, the town already has a school building committee, so we're just augmenting it to align the roster with MSBA they have. The next portion of this, which I heard some commentary on in the previous article, is educational profile online enrollment projections up to 90 days. So that's where we work with MSBA. We develop what our options that we're looking at, and they'll come up with a recommendation for enrollments for that. That enrollment then plays into what you're building or how big it is. Next, as you go through, is maintenance documentation. So what they want to see throughout this process is their investment. When they give you money to build a school, that you actually have a maintenance program to take those assets and maintain them over time and just not let them decay. So that's another one. That takes a decent amount of time. It's going to be a lot of work with the Consolidated Facilities Director, Tom McCarthy. So we've got the documentation on it, and that's one we're going to start on. And then the one that we're here to talk about tonight is the authorization for the study for feasibility funding. So if you go onto MSBA's website, I have the link at the bottom of this, but if you just go to their website there, they give a large spreadsheet that basically breaks down all of the costs of everything there, including the soft costs, which we're talking about tonight. When you look at it, and I'll see if I can use my mouse, under designer, basic services, feasibility study, for the designer, which is the architect, the engineer, they look at that, and essentially, you can't look at the numbers that are here because these are 2019, 2021. Obviously, things are more expensive today. But percentage-wise of the overall construction project, it ranges about 1% or a little bit below. For the OPM, very similar. It's about 0.5% if you look across what's there. So rough numbers, when we were looking at this, we were thinking 1% for the architect, 0.5% for the OPM. So, as everyone's aware, last time I was here, I presented our feasibility study that we did with Arrow Street Engineering, Arrow Street Architecture. At the time, the total construction cost was $133 million, which led to a project cost of $173 million, which I think everyone's familiar with. The thing that a lot of people, we weren't able to present was we had updated that feasibility design to a schematic design. By refining it, we were able to reduce the total construction cost down to $128 million. project cost came down to about 167 million. So when we made the education, the ask for this feasibility study, we based it on the smaller number that was there. So if you take that 128 million rough construction cost that we formulated in November, and you take 1% and 0.5% for architects and 0.5% for the owner's project manager, it basically yields a budget of 1.9 million for a feasibility study based on those percentages, right? For us, what we're looking at is essentially $1 million to architect engineer and 500,000 to the OPM. Essentially, those percentages are actually smaller than what the MSBA has on there for like their average numbers that were there. So I wanted to give that just for context for people to kind of understand where the request came from. And essentially, with that, I'll open it up because I'm sure there's a lot of questions.
Can you go back 2 slides? Do you mind if I ask a question?
Yeah, go for it.
What does it mean, schematic design estimate? How did that?
Yeah, so the last time I was in front of you guys, we had a feasibility design, which was very high level floor plans and stuff like that. What we did is we took that design and further refined it, sharpened our pencils, if you want to call it that, for the design. One of the things we looked at that was a big reduction is the initial feasibility design had a very big retaining wall on there. We worked with the civil engineers, came up with alternative grading to reduce that retainage wall, and then by doing so, we reduced cost.
Okay. Are you still planning, are you still thinking of 2 buildings? Or you off the same?
Everything is off the table right now.
Everything's off the table.
Yeah, so we've hit a hard reset button with this.
Yeah.
So even the teams, even the teams that we have right now, our OPM may not be our OPM going forward. Sorry.
It's the reality. The MSBA makes you they're going to make you start over.
Yeah, so we have to, after we get through this feasibility study, let me go back to the very first slide. We get through the eligibility period, we secure funding for a feasibility study. We do exactly what School Building Committee did 2 years ago. We start interviewing and forming a project team. So that's going to consist of onboarding new OPM and then going through MSBA's designer selection panel for an architect, in which case we have 3 seats at the table out of a total of 15.
Is this the result of the MSBA? Is this all these changes?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, yeah, it's not really changes. It's more of, it's a change for the town because we were going on a certain path of doing it on our own. Right now, we're just getting into a program. So it's basically giving, essentially, call it framework or structure that we need to follow to basically align to what they're asking us to do.
So, sorry, I have like 3 unrelated questions. We are assigned an OPM?
We are not, sorry. What happens is we'll put an advertisement out like we did before. OPMs will respond to it. The town will interview them and select their OPM.
The town being whom?
School Building Committee, whatever representatives do that.
Okay. Can you go to that second to last slide that you were showing? Yes. So why the reduction from the budget based on the MSBA data?
So what we feel is we've done some homework already with a lot of the work we've already done that we can feed into this to kind of save some money. So, for us, we're pretty confident that, the 1.5 million is more than enough money to do what we need to do.
And then what are the outcomes or products of a feasibility study? Like, what do we have at the end of that?
Turn it over to my expert here.
At the end of your feasibility study, you'll have another schematic design, pretty far detailed. You'll have a full project budget, and at that point, the MSBA will ask you to vote on a project budget and lock in, and they will guarantee you your reimbursement rate and the maximum amount of money they'll give you.
And when you say they'll ask you to vote on it, you mean
the town?
The town.
Yes, the town has to, at that point, has to vote on the budget for the project, and then if once you vote on the budget, you'll move into detailed design and construction documents.
But I assume both, but maybe not, both the town and town meeting would need to vote to approve that?
I believe that is the process, correct.
And it doesn't matter in which order that happens, or?
Yeah, so to go into that, that's where we were in the fall.
Yeah.
So we had a feasibility, not talking MSBA, but just process. We had a feasibility study. Sorry.
trying to hit mute, sorry.
Yeah, it was just waiting. Oh,
Sorry. Yes, I'm sorry.
all right, there we go. Sorry about that.
Trying to see your screen, sorry.
So, yeah, sorry about that. So, going back in time in the fall when we were here, for us, we followed what MSBA's process was on our own for the town. We presented a feasibility study, we presented a cost estimate, and basically said to the town, we need to fund this. It will be essentially the same process, and we'll approach the town. The difference is, at this point, we'll be getting money back as part of that overall ask.
And I've been wondering, I'm sure others have too, what are considered eligible costs and what are not for that 45%?
For the feasibility study, most of it will be eligible, if not all of it. It's when you get into, later on into your construction, there's a lot of exclusions. There's a list of 26 exclusions under the CMR process. They don't, if there's ineligible square footage space, they won't participate in the construction of that. They won't participate in design of ineligible spaces. If there's areas, if you want to build a bigger gym than they allow, they won't pay for that. If you want to put an auditorium in an elementary or middle school, they typically won't pay for that. So there are a lot of nuances, and it's a interesting process to get to your 3011 and get the MSB to approve it. But at the time that you finished an SD, you're going to know what is going to be eligible and what isn't going to be eligible.
So and this will be my last question, I promise. So the MSBA will say, this is what we will fund, and here's how much you'll get. The town could elect to do more. We just would do that knowing that it's not eligible for the 45%.
To a point, yes. They won't let you go way overboard. Typically, they won't support a project where if you want to put a 30,000 square foot gym in, they'll probably say no. But they will let you go over their guidelines as long as you understand that it's not coming out of, you're not going to be receiving any grant money for that.
Yes, so just one other clarifying point. So when we talk about the 45% reimbursement, that's on eligible costs. And as you're alluding to, that eligible cost or that percentage gets diluted down to an effective rate. So it will be below 45% of the overall project when we look at it.
Can I just interject this? There's a few people who have questions, but so as to that 45% number, that's a hard number, right? There's no flexibility on the state saying we'll give you more, or maybe can the state say we're going to give you less? Forget about eligible costs, non-eligible costs. Like, just could they ever look at the plan and say 35%? Just because, I mean, like, I'm not saying it's an arbitrary thing. You know what I mean? Like, can they make any decisions either way?
It's a three-factor calculation where they use different socioeconomic factors in the town of how much they're going to give you. Sometimes there's special dispensation around COVID. They gave additional money for projects that were feeling things were getting more expensive because of supply chain issues. So yes, they can, but typically once you lock in after a feasibility study, that's the rate that you're going to get for the project. It's very untypical that it would change after that point.
Okay.
So
up or down.
One other one too is there's additional points you can earn for.
There are additional points for. It used to be for CMR. I don't think that's available anymore. For building management, if you put together a management plan, you can get some additional bonus points for that. But that all is done with your architect and your OPM team as part of the planning, and up until the point that you get to your you lock in that rate. And at the time after feasibility study, when you submit your preferred schematic, you say this is the project you want to do. That's when they're going to lock you in, and that it'll be it at that point. So if you're going to make a push to get more funding and you want to provide reasons, that's the time to do it is prior to that.
Okay. Do you know that CMR? I don't know. No.
46, maybe. I can look it up. I'll find it.
That's a tough one.
The regs, yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to, just so I don't have to do it.
Okay. I'll look it up.
Okay,
Sure, I have it somewhere.
Thank you. We have Judy and then Ron. Judy. Thank you.
So my question is, I don't know, we've already spent money on a feasibility study, and you came up with some architect plans and other things. So are we going to be able to use any of what we found out with that money in this new feasibility? In other words, can we carry it out what we paid for an architect? Is any of that progress you made moving forth with, say, the architect, are we able to move that into this, or is that just lost money?
No, so to the point earlier of the lower number that we're carrying, you know, the 1.5 million as opposed to 1.9 million, you know, our intent is to leverage any of the existing stuff that we have. For example, we did borings along Guile Road that most likely can be reused because, you know, why retake a boring in the same spot to find the same soil conditions? The civil design of realigning the road, which is something we need to do anyways, is probably something that can be salvaged. But the overall program and design of the buildings, probably not. There's some survey work that was done for topographical studies. And again, I'm just running through a list in my head of, you know, additional things that are there that we can probably use. So, to answer your question, you know, shortly is, you know, there are some things that we can use, but the majority of it probably not.
Okay. So we could probably take into factor we're getting more money than the money we lost, so, you know, sometimes that happens.
Mm-hmm.
But you're gonna try and use as much as you can to make good use of that.
Oh, yeah, 100%. Anything that we can,
Oh, okay.
yeah, anything we can leverage that we've already done. I don't want to pay to, you know, redo it and get the same result.
Okay, thank you, Sean.
No problem.
Okay. Ron, then Julia, then Liz.
Yeah, I was wondering, do we know what the MSBA would prioritize that we haven't prioritized? Like, so I think
Sure.
maybe it's theoretically possible that the design comes back very similar. Possibly, right? Unlikely, but I wonder, are they going to ask for us to do specific things like LEED certification, or the building has to be white? Did they tell you what those guidelines are?
They do have guidelines for, they have what's called a space summary document, so when you figure out what your enrollment's going to be, they make you build a building that supports that space summary, and that is the template that has been used for the original study, so all of that information will be turned over to whatever the design firm is. And if you do choose the same architect, they'll have it all. If not, you can certainly leverage that information and provide it to them as they put together their plan and their program.
Yeah, and to touch on your question about, like, will they require you to do a LEED program? What they do is, as I was talking about the points or the reimbursement, they'll offer an additional percentage point or something like that if you do a LEED. So it's almost like they dangle it in front of you to do it for additional reimbursement that's there.
They require CHIPS for schools certification, which is basically LEED silver anyway in order to get into the program. So most of the buildings that are being designed in schools are LEED minimum silver.
And I would hope most of the requirements would be things that we're probably okay with, right? It wouldn't be foreign that they're going to want schools that are just not standard. I assume it's pretty modern requirements. So. Okay, thanks.
No problem.
Julia.
If town meeting votes no on this, is this whole thing dead in the water?
The feasibility, this article?
Yeah.
No. So essentially, we get a 270-day window. So the good thing of presenting this early at February town meeting is that we could revise and come back in May, and then even potentially come back if there's a fall town meeting. So the whole intent is, again, be proactive, get ahead of this as quickly as we can in the hopes that it gets approved early.
But what if in all 3 town meetings it gets voted down by town meeting?
We would not progress.
And the whole MSBA thing is off?
Yeah, if you fail to procure funding for a feasibility study,
within
you
270
can't
days.
continue with the program.
Because you don't meet module 1.
Yeah, within the 270 days.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Julia. Liz?
You might have already said, and I might have missed it, Sean, but this 1.5 million, so I went online, like you said, MSBA's website, and I looked at, they have information for schools that were built, middle school, high school, elementary school, just high school, and I looked at the feasibility study costs for designer and then owner's project manager and kind of added them in my head. Some of them are 1.5 million, some of them are way less, some of them are more. So seems like a very broad range. So how did we come up with the 1.5 for our feasibility study for
Correct.
our town.
So-
Maybe you already said, I don't know.
Yeah, so I wouldn't, yep, so I wouldn't look at dollar numbers because they're historical numbers all the way back to like 2015. So as you're looking at dollar numbers, you have to escalate them, right, to today's dollars. That's why I was saying, look at the percentages that are there. If you look at the percentages, you'll notice it's roughly 1% for architects and about 0.5% for the OPM.
Can you go back to that slide with the
Sure.
comparable?
And it's 1% based off of what total amount? God, yes, to one.
The construction costs, so that's why, so when you look at this, if I put the spreadsheet up there, we'd never see it because it would make the print that small. But essentially what it is when you go on there, the percentages that they give here, where it says right here, percent of total construction, that's based on the total construction cost. So that's why, and I apologize, I presented this slide to tell everybody this was the construction cost that was here. And then from that construction cost, that's how we derived the percentages for it.
No, I'm with you on that, but how did you decide what our total construction cost for our project would be?
Yeah, so what we're doing is leveraging what the project was before.
Okay, so you're
and
using
basing
the
it on-
previous number and multiplying it. So if it were that the MSBA, ultimately it was less, theoretically, the feasibility study could cost us less than even what the town voted to approve.
Yeah, so the key
That's
thing.
the outer range, the 1 point.
Yep, the key thing to keep in mind with this appropriation, it's an authorization to spend money, right? It's not like, it's a lump sum that we just dump out there and do. So it's basically a budgetary number that we're carrying.
The outer
Yep.
range, okay.
The one other thing I would ask everybody to keep in mind is, as we progressed our design previously, there was a number of, every time we thought we got to a point that we answered all the questions, more questions would come up. So having, budget to kind of address those concerns going forward is something that, our committee is concerned about.
Judy?
Okay, Sean, I'm going to preface this question, but it's something I heard through the grapevine. And we all know it was a great song in the day, but it's not a reliable source of information a lot of times. So the grapevine is saying that the state will not pay for the pre-K portion. Can you speak to that?
Sure. So I'll let Sean talk about preschool reimbursements, so.
Yeah, and for past projects with MSBA, they have supported typically the pre-K classroom costs, but if there's additional room, like if you have admin suites that are specific to pre-K, they usually exclude those types of costs. So if you had a separate pre-K gym on top of your gym, they probably wouldn't pay for that. If you had a separate pre-K principal, they would likely exclude that space. But in most of our projects recently, they have paid for pre-K classroom specific space. And any special ed space associated with pre-K, they pay for as well.
So, and that plays into the percentage, the dilution of that 45% reimbursement that's there too. So that's just another highlight for an example of that.
So, just looking at what you thought, pretty sure what you were going to do with the two buildings, one being for pre-K, one being for the middle school. Most likely the classroom space for pre-K will fall okay in this 45%. Is that how I'm understanding what you just said?
Yeah, so the classroom space, the special ed space would all be accommodated. And I'm going off memory of the previous design. I think we had a playroom or like a small gym. It wasn't even a gymnasium. It was just a large empty room with pads on it. And then the administrative space and the nursing space as part of that would not be included. So that's essentially, as we talked about, the 45% overall cost for that building would get diluted down with those non-reimbursables.
Okay, thank you.
Julia, then Ron.
Do you have an average, what the average reimbursement is as a percentage of the total
Yep.
construction cost?
Yeah, so leading up to the kind of decision that was coming from MSBA, one of the things we talked about as a committee was if we get accepted to MSBA, do we really want to hit reset and take a longer timeline, or do we want to just kind of go it on our own? So we asked PMA to look at that and understand essentially what that diluted cost would be from 45%, roughly, and correct me if I go wrong, it diluted it down to roughly a 28% reimbursement that we saw on there. And that was based on the project that we were doing before. So they went through the floor plans, the schematic design we have, basically acting as MSBA would when we get to a certain point, and filtering that down. And I think from that 173 million or 167 million revised number, we saw essentially an effective reimbursement of 28%.
And the reason it's that large is most of it is the building square footage cost. They cap what they pay for construction costs, and buildings cost more than they pay for. And they know that. It's not, they were trying to spread money around as a grant program, so they are limiting how much they're going to reimburse any building, and if whatever your cost is above that, that is on you.
I had a question. How does the design, so when the designer's taking it into account, the reimbursement rate, I assume, right? They're gonna know what's paid for and what's not. Who's gonna make the call on, do we wanna spend money for something that's not gonna be reimbursed? Is that the school building committee?
That would be my anticipation, yes.
Like the 8-lane swimming pool.
They don't pay for swimming pools.
Well, if you want to,
Just
pay for it.
Just to be clear, we don't have room on the site for an 8-lane swimming pool.
Okay, so
Sorry.
the committee will still make the call. The designer can
Correct.
propose designs and try to save money and.
Yeah, so very similar. So when the school building committee was looking at this previous design from the architect that we had, there were multiple options that were presented along the way. One being, do you want a single building with both programs in there, or 2 split buildings? And it basically fell to the committee under our charge to basically make that decision.
I have a couple questions.
Sure.
Separate building, the state's wouldn't pay for separate pieces because it would cost more. It's also going to cost the towns probably more too, because they have to have maintenance on both buildings. Would you rethink that? Is it reasonable to think that maybe you'd rethink that and make it one building?
Yeah, so essentially what's happened, so right now, the whole program that you saw before, the 2 buildings, is gone. We're starting from scratch.
So the state, you would, I mean, but in your head, you wouldn't be pushing 2 buildings?
Well, the 2 buildings, so to play back on the reasoning behind the 2 buildings. So the 2 buildings were there, and it alluded to a point that came up earlier in the previous discussion about expansion of the preschool, is that in the future, if we needed to expand preschool, the opportunity, if we had 2 separate buildings, allowed that, right? The cost by which we had 2 separate buildings was actually equal from our analysis. And I talked about that last time with you at our previous meeting, that the construction of the main school was going to be steel framing and CMU, whereas going to be like timber type construction there. The HVAC system was actually derived from the larger building. So when we looked at the overall cost and looked at square footage cost of the big building as one big building, as opposed to a big building with a small building, different construction, it was equal. So for our mind, when we made that decision to go to 2 buildings, we didn't see it as additional cost. We saw it as a cost equal. But going forward now under MSBA, again, we're starting essentially from scratch. It's a blank slate that we're doing. We have to look at a number of different options all the way through, and then basically fine tune those options to what we want them to really hire the architects to study. We don't want to do too many options because it will cripple the overall design. So we really want to focus in on what are those options we want to look at.
I believe that at the cost, but the additional costs on that are like maintenance and dealing with it and having somebody go in there and admin and everything else. The state, just getting back to, how does the state determine the cost of the building? Because they have to accept the quotes. Like, do they have a cost per square foot that they do, or?
They have a cost per square foot that they reimburse on, but it's the project team's responsibility to use estimators to tell them when you're going into that project and ask them for approval what your estimated construction cost is going to be, and then it's your responsibility to get the town to support that construction cost. And then when the bids come in, if they're not on budget, you either have to value manage out something, or you need to go back to the town and ask for more money, and the MSB will not support the additional funds.
So do they have a standard that they use, do you know, or do they just look at your bids? They don't go out and look at like what's out in the market per square foot to build a building?
They set their rates based on available funds, I believe. So they do vote sometimes every year, sometimes every a few years to increase how much they reimburse on a given building. But as far as your building costs, they don't have a set cost for how much your building can cost per square foot, but they have a set cost of how much they're going to reimburse you for that building.
Can I keep asking this question? Who determines, so we go out to bid, the town goes out to bid. Who determines who we bid with?
Who determines
Like, how do you know who to bid, what construction
It's a
companies?
public process.
Public process?
Yeah, you have to do sealed bids, you put it out, central register, other things, so.
There's two delivery methods in Mass, 149 and 149A. So 149 is general contractor. You send out, you advertise a bid package to general contractors and subcontractors. You get a collection of subcontractors in, you publish those, and the general contractors bid on that. Construction manager at risk, you hire a construction manager earlier on, and with them, you send out bids for filed subbids, and then they make up the difference for the people who aren't filed, for the work that is not classified under a filed subbid. And it's a process, but it's about, yeah, MGL Chapter 149 spells it all out.
All right, thank you.
Jay?
Thank you. I'd like to go back to something that Ms. Carroll said in the earlier session, which is, I guess my broad question is, what criteria did MSBA use in accepting us into this part of the program? And to get, not to beat around the bush, but to what extent should we view our acceptance into this program as the state saying, yes, Milton, you're overcrowded, you need another school, and if so, what did they use to determine that?
So I apologize, some of this may be repetitive,
Absolutely.
you know what I mean, because I wasn't privy to the previous conversation, but obviously the statement of interest is their starting point for what they do. So if you recall, we submit that in the spring, and as they determine that, they kind of narrow it down a little bit and then go into site visits. This year was the first time MSBA actually visited us in person. As I mentioned to this committee before, if you don't believe there's overcrowding, go to the schools, talk to the principals. They're living it day in and day out. I mean, if you watch school committee meeting just from last week and listen to Principal Concanon talk about kindergartens, there's no more space. They're at their maximum capacity for everywhere, and that's just going to propagate through as it's going. The state won't directly say, Jay, what was the key thing that made them decide to accept us, but, my take on it is, witnessing the overcrowding. Principal Concanon, Principal Redden on their tour here gave a very detailed tour, the Collycock Cunningham, of all the spaces that have been converted, locations, what we've been doing for temporary solutions, just looking at the library and how much it's been cannibalized was part of it. The one other part, at least on my take of it, is having identified land as part of this is another thing that's different this year than it's been in previous years. The one thing with MSBA is they want projects ready to go. So I think by us doing all the work that we've done so far up to this point was, part of what got us over the hump. And, I appreciate all the help from, our new representatives, at the state level that also, helped as best they can. This is a major win for the town. So I think a lot of us are pretty excited about it.
Anybody have any other questions just regarding the funds to continue on the project feasibility? Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Just, it just goes to, and this is, I understand, but so for special ed, there's a build out beyond a classroom space. They don't cover that.
For special ed, they work with DESE for a special education plan, and they typically do support whatever the special ed needs of a town are. I can't say absolutely they're going to pay for everything, but generally speaking, special ed programs are thought by the MSB as necessary, and if DESE approves them, then they typically support them.
Okay, because I thought that may be the case.
Yes,
but,
that is typically the case.
but, okay.
And it's a 963 CMR 2.00.
963. CMR
2.00.
2.00. Thank you very much. Are there any other questions now for the panel?
Jay has his hands up.
Jay?
I'd like to follow up on what you just said.
Sure.
Okay, yeah, I'd like to follow up on what the chair just asked, because I've been hoping for a long time that this new school will have space so that, I mean, we send a lot of kids out of district for their special ed needs. That not only is a huge financial burden to the town, as everyone in this room knows, it's a burden to the kids who have to get on a bus and ride for an hour each way. The parents have to send them there instead of sending them to a school a mile or two away. So I've been hoping for a long time that there'd be extra space in this school to keep kids that we're sending out of district now in district. Now, if the words extra space in this school create horror in people's mind, and I understand why, we want to be on budget. Do I interpret what I just heard to mean possibility or the likelihood that if we build extra space to provide special education needs for kids who live in this town so they won't have to be sent out of district, that we'd be getting 45% of that? Did I hear that or something approaching that?
So, yeah, I'll do my best to answer that, Jay, and Mark, feel free to chime in if I go off base. But, so essentially, part of this, and it's to Ron's point earlier, is there's going to be options that are going to be presented to the school building committee that they have to weigh in on. For example, if we needed to do extra space to house additional special ed, that's something, school building committee will be working with the school committee. Similar to what we did under the feasibility study previously, we did a whole visioning series all last spring and summer with the districts. So that incorporated all aspects of the districts, from teachers to principals down to the IT person, maybe even the janitor was there too. But special ed as a component of that has a say as part of that visioning sessions. And that's part of this feasibility study that we're going to be doing. The reality is, can we build all the space to bring all the kids from out of district in? Most likely not. But to build additional space to bring certain kids back in that we could, again, I think that's going to get to the discussion with school building committee, with school committee, us as a town to kind of look at. And, Mark, you can fill in any voids I may have missed.
No, I think well said. I think the goal is to bring as many students into the town for all the reasons you said, Jay, both financially and academically for the benefit of the kids. Not every program just can be, just because there's some very unique programs. But I think I can speak for Peter and the other staff where that has always been their goal and a desire of theirs, and just not something right now they can look at because of the limitations of space. So this certainly provides that opportunity.
Point about the space in the existing schools.
Dr. Carroll,
Dr.
please,
Carroll.
come on up.
Sorry. Just only add to that it's what we can be building within the new school, but then it's also the programs that we are able to then support with the space that's freed up in our existing 4 elementary schools. That's another element to it. So those would be the, probably at the elementary level, that's where we would be able to service additional special education students, would be in the space that's freed up by moving the students out. But again, with MSBA, we'll go back through, start from the beginning to make sure that the program of the building is, it may change. It may not be the pre-K with the middle school. It will get vetted and sort of redetermined. But yeah, that's an important element, is what the new space within our existing buildings too. Sorry.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone? A last call. Can't drag Mr. O'Rourke back here again.
Happy to come back anytime.
Oh, I know that. I am embarrassed asking you to.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I really appreciate the information, the time running across town, Sean, as always, and thank you, sir.
So just a note, we were in the old fire station headquarters, new conference room. I highly recommend you guys start reserving that. It's a very
very
nice
nice.
space. So it was a very short walk from one
Oh,
building.
okay, I was trying to, I like the blue conference room.
All right. Try it.
I know,
It's a
I'm afraid to.
yeah.
I'm afraid to, but I really do appreciate you making this happen for us tonight and
Thank you.
just work with our schedule. Mark, good to see you again.
Thank
Hey,
you.
Thank you
good
very
night.
much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Carroll. Okay, we're approaching the 9 o'clock hour. I have provided for some warrant committee discussion, if the committee would so choose. I'm going to add and just say that, we're kind of coming up against the deadline for our drafting. And I expect a busy next couple of weeks. And usually there's a kind of a break in between going to print, the warrant going to print and town meeting that we can all enjoy. That probably will not be happening this time around. And I know I asked about the discussion, but this is my discussion to you because I want to get this out of the way. There's a planning board article about our ADU requirement that we have to look at. There's also a lighting bylaw, potentially, most likely. Those are going to take a lot of work because they're pretty big. I don't trust that they're going to be ready by the time the warrant goes to print. So that's what we're going to be working on between the end of the month and town meeting. Those will be green sheet comments, I trust, unless something happens. So I'd really like to focus on what we have in front of us. I know that there's a couple of money items. I've posted for Wednesday. I'm really hoping that our town engineer can make it here. I've spoke to the town administrator about having to come here to speak to some of the concerns about the lead pipe project. In addition to that, I'm also seeking town council to come in and just speak about the liquor license liability. For some of those of you who are new, at times we discuss an article and we vote. There have been times where we have a speaker, we discuss and we vote. I trust that if we can get the 2 speakers in here for Wednesday, I will amend the meeting notice to include town council if necessary. But I will do that. But I would see the following week us voting on articles. And we're going to discuss more about comments and how the comment process and who will be writing the comments and how that'll work. But I want to get us to a point as a committee where everyone's feeling comfortable to vote. There are some heavy lifters, the lead pipe. There are a couple of articles asking for money. I assume those are going to have a little bit of discussion here at this table. But I think some of the others are relatively easier, and that we could probably take care of in quicker fashion. Are we feeling that way as a committee? I know maybe some of the new members may, Liz.
I know that at least this first warrant article that we discussed today, there was a minor recommended change that it include all the current members of the school building committee, and anyway, they're going to change the language. So by then, do you think we will have like the final version of all of those warrant articles that we've already been provided?
Yes.
So we're voting on the appropriate one.
Of course, yeah, and that's my job as the chair.
No,
And I'm going to be working with Mr. Milano moving forward on that. I mean, as you all know, we can recommend anything we we choose if we think the language needs to be chosen, but we will be provided with language on each article as voted on by the select board and as approved by them. They approve, we review,
Right.
and then we present to town meeting.
So as long as that's all,
Yeah.
then I'm fine with going ahead next week.
And just so you know, and I know some who are town meeting members, sometimes that changes between our vote and when it goes to the floor, and those are usually addressed through us, through the town administrator, and then, of course, at town meeting through a green sheet. So there can be changes. Usually those are typos or otherwise. They're usually not true substantive changes, but that can also happen. So I just wanted to kind of get a feeling from everyone on the committee. I guess, are we comfortable? We'll hear from town council. we'll hear from our town engineer, and then move forward to voting.
Yes.
Is there any, I'll get you, Julia, is there anyone else that this board would like to hear from, or this committee would like to hear from prior to commencing votes on any of these?
Your plan is to start voting next week?
Probably, Macy. Jay.
I guess I've got two things. One, to directly answer the question you just asked, I think we would benefit from hearing from Ms. Hall again, with, once their proposals are a little bit more solid. But that's not why I raised my hand. Can I
Yeah,
say
let me
something
answer
else?
that. Jay, we will have the planning board in when that draft language is like put to paper and they're looking to get approval from the select board. So the warrant will be open back up. We'll have a time to really vet that, but it's not going to be in the regular course. Because it's going to go to print, so we're going to be doing that kind of, okay. And what else did you want to talk about?
The other thing is, so I heard Mr. O'Rourke say, if anyone needs to be educated about the overcrowding situation at the schools, come visit. And I take him literally. I don't take that as a figure of speech. I take that as an actual offer. And so, figuratively, looking around this table, I know there are a bunch of people with different levels of exposure to the overcrowding issue at the schools. Some questions came up tonight. So, Mr. Chair, would it be appropriate for us to have maybe a warrant committee optional tour of one of the elementary schools during a school day? Just speaking for myself, if it's just me, I don't think I'm pretty convinced in the overcrowding, so I don't think I need it. But if there are people around this table who want to learn more about the overcrowding, I'd like to take Mr. O'Rourke up on his offer. And do we as a committee think it would benefit for some or a lot of the members to do such a tour in the near future?
Okay, I'm just gonna throw that out there. Would anybody be interested? I know that.
Jay, I would be interested.
Sure. Okay. I know. I was going to say before you answered that we've had these meetings. We've had site walks before as a committee, and that's usually done through the presenters. So Jay, Macy.
Are the sidewalks necessary? Should we not expect the people here to present that their testimony, if you can call it that, even though they're not under oath, to be credible? And then take it.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
No, I mean,
so my question is that, are we then going out and doing our own research and investigation before we vote? I mean, I'm just saying, I'm just putting that out there.
Well, yeah, we can certainly do that as warrant members, right. And I mean, I frequently, credit what is being presented as, but then again, it's trust but verify, and if there are individuals, and I'm not going to call on the committee as a whole, but if there are individuals who are truly interested in this and would really like to go to school and can make time from their personal lives and work day to go during the day, I'm sure it would be feasible. There's a couple of phone calls and we could make it happen. So, Jay, I appreciate you making that recommendation, and I, as the chair, could work with any member or members who would like to maybe get into school. I'm sure Dr. Burrows, Dr. Carroll would be more than happy to have a member of the warrant committee or several members go through. So, Liz?
Yes. Yeah. So I was going to say, sort of to your point, Macy, I think there's something about going and then talking to the principal or whatever, because when I've actually seen the schools, it just gives you a little bit of color to kind of what they're saying. So to actually see the wall in the library versus just hearing about it or seeing a picture of it. So I myself, I've been to some of the schools, but not all of them. I would be interested in seeing sort of firsthand what we're talking about. And I think that, to your point, yes, credit them, but I also think there's sort of to go off on a legal topic, I think there's a reason why sometimes they bring the jury to the site,
View, if you will.
here, it might make sense to kind of have a visual to understand what does a wall in a library look like? What does that space look like for the children? I would really value that opportunity.
Sure. Yeah, I would never dissuade any member of the committee from any type of due diligence that they want to do and share their experiences with the committee and really with the public. I mean, that's really what we're doing here. So, Jay, I'm gonna talk to you more maybe tomorrow or at some point when we can speak. But I will send Dr. Carroll an email. I will float this to her. I don't see an issue. I will float this to her and see what the response is. And if it's something we can put together, I'll put that together.
Would it be open meeting? Like the public would be invited?
It would be like we wouldn't. That's
We
a
don't
great
talk.
thing.
No one talks.
Well, I mean, you really
That's
can't.
my concern, like, so if you're going to site visits, right, it becomes a public issue.
Both separately.
So
Yeah.
for example, I mean, if you wanna, I'm gonna take the fire department for an example. Are we gonna go follow them while they're fighting fires? I think that's a
Yeah.
safety issue, right? And it's the same with police, are we gonna go and do a ride-along and watch them execute search warrants and the rest? It's a public safety issue, so it's the same, I mean, so I'm
No,
just
I
wondering what the
appreciate it.
boundary is. And when we do go do those site visits, it becomes a public, right, forum.
Couldn't you just have three-person teams go visit them like we have subcommittees, it's the same thing? I mean, that's not open
Yeah, I
violation.
mean, we would, but I really appreciate,
Of course,
Macy's
yeah.
point, and that's something I'd probably have to figure out the town administrator, but probably.
I would worry if we had 8 groups of us, that's going to take up, it's very disruptive.
that's what I mean.
To have adults walking through the school. I mean,
So let's ask the originator of this idea, Jay.
now he has homework.
Jay, can you offer any commentary on how to reconcile open meeting disruption to the school day?
If there are less than 8 of us, it's not an open meeting.
Exactly.
And, because there's not a quorum. And as I think Steve just suggested, if there are more than 8 of us, split us into 2. We're not meeting.
You're not gonna all go to the
This
same
group's going
school.
that way
It
and
would
this
be
group's going this
disruptive.
way.
You'd have to space it out.
So I like this idea. Let me just make let me do some outreach, and maybe I'll have an answer for everyone on Wednesday. If not, it'll be via email.
I do think it's a good idea because I'm very curious about the metrics they're using. The metric we've always heard was overcrowding the classrooms, and he punted on that metric. He called on. I wrote it down, so I'd like to see it
Okay.
personally.
Okay.
Trust but verify.
Yeah, I can.
Yeah, can,
Oh, I'm sorry, Jay. Please go ahead.
I was just going to respond to Steve. Yeah, I didn't want to interrupt when our guests were here, but what I've heard over the past multiple years is that class size isn't the best gauge because class size is the number of students divided by the number of rooms. And we've been taking an art room, turning it into a classroom, taking a music room, turning it into a classroom, taking a library, turning it into a classroom. All that, they've been bending over backwards so that the average class size doesn't get too big, so that you don't have 35 first graders in one room. But, so, the average class size has stayed pretty reasonable because they've leached into all these other physical rooms. That's what I'd always heard. That's not what they said tonight, and I didn't want to chime in while our guests were here, but that's one reason why class size may not be the best judge for us.
Can I ask a clarification question on something?
Yeah, you can, please.
So they talked about, I think the MSBA route, if they can get reimbursed, would be awesome. I think it'd be great. So what I'm trying to understand is he talked about 45%, then he mentioned 28%, which would infer there was a 17% sunk cost lost, right? So they researched this project with Arrow Street, hired an OPM. That cost is non-recoverable now. I'm trying to understand why 28%. I'm trying to understand that.
Are we excluded? And the caps.
The cost per square foot that we're coming in
Okay.
at is 803.
Thank you.
MSBA is going to only pay 500.
Okay, that explains it. Thank you.
The extra space that they won't allow.
Thank you.
Because we have extra space, or we're paying too
No, not even just the extra
No,
space.
it's 2 different things. So they're only paying a certain square footage rate. But then the extra space might be what was the room? The media room, the
Yeah.
meditation room?
Yeah.
Did we
Yoga,
say
whatever it was.
So between the two different factors are the exclusions
Yes.
and
But he said
not,
there's
not,
26
not
exclusions.
27.
I thought he said 26 exclusions.
27.
27.
Oh, geez.
I wrote it down. 27 exclusions,
I'm gonna check it out.
plus the other factor is that we will not be reimbursed at the actual cost rate because of the caps. So really, the effective rate is, even if we had no exclusions, the effective rate would be lower than 45% because they're not reimbursing 100% of what our actual costs are.
And not all costs are eligible.
Correct.
Yeah, so,
That compounds it.
yeah, so even if we have no exclusions, everything we design, the effective rate of what we're reimbursed at is less than
So they-
100% of the 45%, if that
So they
makes
would still take a loan for example, 180 million for the school, for example,
Yeah.
and get reimbursed on a percentage of that bit less the 27 exemptions.
Yeah, about 28%, he said.
Would we actually take a $100 million loan, or are the reimbursements direct?
I was going to ask that. I think you get, well, it's not guaranteed they're going to get the 45 or whatever percent. That they've got to go through those gates. That's not guaranteed, right? There's, I
But
think I saw.
after, what they said was after the feasibility study, they would effectively set the reimbursement, lock in the reimbursement rate at that point, based on the
Before you
feasibility.
build.
Before you vote.
Before you build.
Before you
vote.
vote, before you build. So you wouldn't be required to do anything before you knew how much money you were going to get back.
And he said that the majority of the costs of the feasibility study are reimbursable.
Yeah.
Even the previously sunk costs, potentially.
So that was not a 45, just so everyone's clear, it's not a 45% of these, what they're asking for us now. It's much greater than that. So, okay, I just want to make that up. Julia,
So just back to the sort of scheduling issue. So you're anticipating that we will have heard from everyone we're hoping to hear from by Wednesday. And then we're leaving Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday for discussion and voting,
potentially, yeah.
potentially. And then the warrant goes to print.
Well, then we have another whole week,
Yeah, look at my calendar.
right? We
here.
have like another whole week. So I'm kind of,
Gotcha.
when I say next week, I'm hoping we're going to get who we need to
Yeah.
talk to. So I am kind of saying that, you know, if we could have a meeting on a Wednesday or a Thursday and vote on a few of these and assign out and allow people to start working on comments or whatever, it's just, you know, just so we can get ahead of it. We need to get essentially what's before us in draft to print. And then we can worry about, we can have significant time to do ADU, lighting, like whatever else the warrant may be opened up for. So
And when does the warrant go to print?
the end of the month.
End of the month.
I thought it went to print a week after next.
On the 28th?
The 27th.
I thought someone had said, yeah, the 28th. Or,
You said that at one point.
28th, yeah.
It's 4 days.
So we don't
Wednesday,
have-
Thursday.
a week after next week.
We don't then.
Do you need everyone here to vote?
No, we do not.
Just a quorum.
We just have a quorum.
And so the articles that we are not anticipating being ready to vote on before the warrant goes to print are ADUs, lighting, you said? Are there others?
There was.
Was it liquor license? Was it?
No, we're gonna address that here.
I can tell you.
Was it the site plan?
Site plan. That's what it was.
Yeah, part of planning board. So they're meeting later this month, and they're not finalized.
Okay, so 3 potential.
So there's 2 definite, 3 potential, and that from the time that these matters that we have in front of us go to print, we'll work on those.
Yeah.
And that would be, obviously, that's going to be heavy planning board. I expect I expect we're going to want to probably speak to them at least a couple of times. Kind of the initial, and then we consume it, understand it, and come back for a final round. And then in terms of the lighting bylaw, we saw one a couple of years ago. It was very dense at that time. I expect the building inspector, maybe someone from the select board, or any maybe consolidated, anybody from any interested parties, I think, who would be either responsible for helping with enforcement or.
Who's this article coming from?
I think the lighting itself is coming from the select board. Okay, so it's not coming from a committee or a department within the town. I think it's coming from the select board. I don't know if the origins were a citizen, but this has percolated for a couple of years now. So I think we're going to be seeing it. Liz?
My notes were that the warrant needs to go to print pretty much the week of January 28th is what Nick said. So it might not be on the 28th, just sometime during that week. Maybe we have a little wiggle room.
I'll talk to our town administrator.
I wrote down what he's.
I trust that, we're not talking about it tonight, but like, the ADU bylaw is probably be a pretty long comment. It's a lot of information there that people are going to have to read. I'm not speaking towards these. I don't think they're, aside from maybe some of the money ones, I don't think there's a lot of analysis.
So no meeting Thursday this week.
Not this week.
Right.
I wanted to have one. So this is the issue. It's just lining up speaker availability. I'm getting anxious at the time. I trust we're going to have the town engineer here on Wednesday, so we're going to get some stuff done, and it would be good to get the lead pipe stuff out of our way. If town council's not available, we can have them in maybe on Tuesday. So I'm kind of asking to the board here, like, and I know Macy, you might not be physically here, but like, what do we?
I'm not around next week.
So you're not around next?
I'll try to call in.
Yeah,
Sure.
I don't think I'll be able,
I'll be out of the country, so
yeah,
it's gonna be tough.
I'm
Okay.
12 hours ahead, so I won't.
Okay. Yeah. I don't expect.
In the middle of the night.
So how do we feel about a potential Thursday meeting? If I have to pull a Thursday meeting to get town
I'd
council,
rather have a Thursday
I
then
can do
following
this
week.
week, but then for
Next week.
2
What's our-
weeks I can't.
I have a
I mean,
conflict, but I can
people
move
okay
it.
with it?
Yeah.
I'm asking a lot, Warrant Committee, but not like this is the time that we're like it's a crunch. and
3 nights in a row next week with a short week is a little brutal, but
is.
make it work.
Yeah.
If we need to.
Okay, I think and I think this is for me. I think by after Wednesday, I'm going to have a probably excellent idea, or actually maybe hopefully I'm hoping by tomorrow afternoon I have an excellent idea on if we're even going to have a Thursday meeting and how next week will look.
You're talking about Thursday next week or Thursday
Thursday
this week?
this week.
This week.
If I get a call, put it this way, I know this. If town council says, hey, I can make it there on Thursday, I'd rather have him in, maybe do something shorter, save our substantive discussion for next week with our votes. Is everyone, you'd be good with that? Yeah.
I'm fine, Thursday.
I know, Lori, you have a conflict. Yeah.
If the speakers can't physically come and they can come on Zoom, that's an
course.
option too, right? So
Yeah, it's just if they're available. And that's it.
Okay. Cool.
Does anybody have any other like questions, just in terms of procedure, or anything else that you'd like me to hunt down, or anyone else? Anything? Okay. So we have a tentative meeting scheduled for Wednesday. We're looking to hear from the town engineer. Just keep an eye on your email. I may update that agenda with additions, but other than that, I don't have anything more for the committee.
Thank you.
Okay. Do I hear a motion?
Motion to
Make a
adjourn.
motion to adjourn?
Second? Second by Liz. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.